Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we are returning to War in the Pacific, Admirals Edition, our Let's Play series against Evoken. It is May 22nd of 1942, that's the replay that we're going to be looking at today, and we will be looking at the May 23rd Orders phase. As you may recall, the fortress or the holdout at Batavia in the Dutch East Indies recently fell to the Japanese, and so they pretty much have a stranglehold on all of the Dutch East Indies. There's a couple of isolated bases left that they hold, or that we hold, but nothing with anything more than a few troops. So for all intents and purposes, the Dutch East Indies have fallen. The Philippines have not fallen yet. The bulk of the American and Filipino troops are at Clark Field. They've already lost the base, but we counterattacked into it. And we are now sitting there with almost no supply left. So once the Japanese do decide to attack, those troops are going to fall pretty quick. But we're already way past the historical fall-by date in the Philippines, so those troops have done much better than historical. Meanwhile, in Burma, we're also doing better than historical. We have not lost Burma yet. The Japanese have actually been pushed back and lost Mole Mine. And so the situation there is good, and if the Japanese don't do anything over the coming weeks, then what'll happen is, well, not weeks, but over the coming years, eventually when we get B-24s, we can bomb some pretty important targets in Indochina and also in some of the Dutch East Indies. And when we get the B-29s, even the early ones, we could reach all the way to Palembang and really hit the Japanese there hard, crippling their oil production probably a year and a half early. That would probably win the war way early. So they will want to take Burma before we solidify it too much. No indication yet that they are trying to do that, but you know, we've did I say B-10s? I meant the B-24 if I said the B-10. But I have to imagine Burma is a major target for the Japanese, perhaps once the Philippines falls, but they can't let us get too dug in there, or they run the risk of major problems down the line. It is easy for them to isolate Burma, but the longer they go, the stronger we get, and the more likely we put up a fight that they don't, you know, that even if they win, it sort of becomes a Pyrrhic victory, but we'll see. All right, so pretty quiet turn. Nothing really to note on the naval and air side. Couple of small bombing raids. Japanese launching bombardment attacks at in the Philippines, and doesn't really look like anything else happens. So I guess that was like the quietest turn that that could have been in terms of results. But we'll take a look at the map. I'm a little bit nervous, to be honest, guys. Evoken hasn't, I wouldn't say he's been taunting me, but he did say in the save that basically, in the name of the save file, basically, that big things are coming. And then he also said a couple of things in a private chat, like he's got big plans, and this could all be some sort of elaborate bluff. But like, I've got it in my head that he's going to launch a carrier raid on the Philippines, or not the Philippines, on Pearl, and like cripple our battleships there, or that he's going to launch some sort of assault on Australia or New Zealand. You know, the interesting nuance here of this particular game is that Evoken was our logistics officer for a good chunk, until we had lost 3 or 4 other opponents and he took over. So he has, whether he intends to use it or not, you know, he can't erase his memory. He does have knowledge of where some of our assets were, perhaps where we're weak, and it certainly would be difficult to not incorporate that into your planning somehow. If he was to go after for the Philippines, we're not too weak there. We've got almost 200 fighter aircraft, most of them of the P-40 in different variants, a couple of Buffaloes. But so we've got a pretty solid fighter force in the Pearl. And then we've also got a ton of flak there too. And I don't have any intel saying he's going to launch an attack there. We've got a ton of flak there because of all the ships here. I am tempted though, because there are a lot of ships in Pearl. It is kind of a all your eggs in one basket situation. We've got like 9 battleships here that are all ready for service. And then we've got an aircraft carrier. We could pull the 27 Wildcats off the carrier and put them on the island, and that'll bolster the combat air patrol there as well, so that we'd have over 220 fighter aircraft to intercept the Kitabutai. So maybe it's not likely that he goes for Pearl. I'm not really sure. We've also, where else would we be vulnerable? Like, I suppose he could make a strike on Pearl or on Australia. I don't think he'd make a strike in Northern Australia. He could land troops there. We've got some troops at Darwin. He'd have to land at least a division there, but to what end, right? Like taking the Northern Australian coast would be a nuisance. It would give him some victory points, but even a lot of these northern bases really aren't worth that many victory points. So like he could definitely do it, but why? You know, I don't have the fighters to repel him from anywhere in Australia, really. We do have a fair bit of ground forces in the southeast of Australia. There's one American infantry division, I think one American infantry division down here, the Americal infantry division, which is a good one. Well-equipped and resting and training. We've also got one of the elite Australian divisions from the Middle East that was pulled back here. And then we've got several other divisions as well. But so he could launch a strike at Australia, but I don't think it's likely to succeed. I don't think he's got the forces there to push there and push elsewhere as well. Plus, if he does push south of like Rockhampton or something like that, then we get a whole bunch of reinforcements from Europe that I don't think he'll want to trigger. Alternatively, he could try and cut Australia off from the east coast and make a drive for Fiji or Pago. We have reinforced both those places against attack. They're not strong enough to withstand the carriers, but I mean, we've got a division worth of troops and some good American ones with some good American artillery at Suva. Nadi has some Australian troops as well, about another division worth of troops there. A lot of those have upgraded. He could make a play for Pago, which he knows we've got a fair amount of shipping there. Nothing crippling though. Like even if you sank every single ship here, it would suck, but it wouldn't be, you know, here comes the whirlwind. And he'd have to commit a whole division to it too, because we've got some good American units, some Marines there as well. I suppose he could launch toward the more weakly held Tonga Islands to really play with logistics, but that doesn't really seem epically dangerous. Alternatively, he could go for New Zealand, but he knows we have reinforced there as well. He'd need probably at least 2 divisions at the end of an incredibly long and precarious supply line. I don't think he wants to do that. So, like, where would he go? You know, like, he could go for Midway again because we did retake Midway. I suppose if he was going to do a Pearl attack, he could try and land troops at Pearl. But we've got at least 2 divisions worth of troops defending there. They're not all the best, but actually a fair bit of armor, too. 3 armored battalions and some engineers. I don't think that's likely. The outlying islands he could land on and become a nuisance, but the ability to supply an offensive at that distance just doesn't seem very likely. The Kitabutai really is at full strength, so maybe? I don't know. You know, your guess, and it starts with a C. Yeah, I mean, that could be. I can never pronounce Ceylon correctly. I'm not quite sure. So I just say Sri Lanka. That could be an option that would really play havoc. It is a little bit isolated. We don't have enough troops there to defend, probably. He'd probably have to commit at least 2 to 3 divisions there, I would think. We've got 3, or actually 2 very good British brigades. Like, these guys are absolute crack, elite, all of that jazz. 80 experience on 2 of those brigades. He'd have to commit at least 2 full divisions to the landing there. He could land maybe at like Trycomali, which is a little bit off center, or he could land for Colombo. And we do have some ships repairing there, refitting there. It's got some important resources and shipyards there. We don't have a lot of fighter aircraft. I guess the downside for him taking Sri Lanka is while it does make supplying Rangoon precarious, and it really would limit in a way, like we have a fair bit of shipping out of Calcutta that could continue to shuttle in, and we'd send supplies via rail there, so they wouldn't be totally cut off by a landing here. Like, they'd still be a good distance away from any air attacks there, but it would really limit reinforcements. Like, running new shipping in there would be difficult, and if you got air power established in Thailand, we would attrit our shipping here pretty quick, so that Burma and perhaps Eastern India would be at risk. The main problem with an attack at Sri Lanka is we can bring to bear a large force and base it out of like Madras. How can that? Range of 6. That's not even like, that's basic fighter range. Even the longer range stuff could probably get to Trycomali. We could base some aircraft out of pretty easily out of Cochin. which is about 8 away. Like, we could pretty heavily hit forces in this area off the Indian subcontinent, but it certainly would be a distraction and a diversion of resources. I suppose he could launch a carrier raid into the Indian Ocean, or even the Arabian Sea. That could be a problem for us to deal with. I think we started pulling our carriers out of Bombay before after he switched sides, so he may not know that we've already pulled both of both the Lexington and the Saratoga out, and we've also sent the Enterprise away too. So all we really have, I mean, we have a fair bit of carriers left, but it's mostly British stuff. It's the Yorktown is the lone American carrier left, and then you've got three British carriers with a fourth one on the way. So like those would be big losses if we lost all those British carriers, but the war doesn't get lost because you lose your British carriers. The war gets lost if you lose the American ones. Nothing against the Royal Navy or anything, but if they don't pack the punch, the American ones do. The Indomitable, you can see here, has a total of 49 aircraft on it. And the Yorktown in the same group has, well, it doesn't have quite as many fighters because we haven't manipulated the fighter wings, so it's 27 to 32. So the Indomitable has the edge there, but then we've got 36 dive bombers and 15 torpedo planes. So, I mean, we have as many attack aircraft as they have total aircraft, almost anyway, on a single American carrier. And the other British carriers are no exception. They're just small. The victory value of the British carriers are almost about 50% less than the American, actually even more. So it's 340 divided by 2 is 170. So they're a little bit more than worth one half of the American ones. But I mean, they're still very valuable ships. It might change the strategic picture in terms of his drive on Burma. So I could see perhaps a raid up toward Bombay or somewhere along the Indian coast. But if they do try and go up this way, we'll probably get warning and we can either put to sea or escape or attack them or whatever we want to do. So Sri Lanka does feel like a possible attack, but it's a much more long developing one. Another alternative I thought of is he could go for Perth. Like he knows that our supply line from Australia at the moment, we do have a couple of large convoys going from the American West Coast to the Australian East Coast. But the majority of our supplies right now are flowing through Perth, between South Africa and Perth. So if he timed it right, he could come in here and hit some pretty big-ass convoys with a lot of supply, a lot of victory points. And he could also hit the ships in port at Perth, which is not insignificant. We've got a single battleship there, some light cruisers. We don't have many aircraft there. We do have about a little bit over a brigade worth of troops, but we can reinforce via rail. And also just like a lot of supply. So like he could really disrupt our supply of Australia if he raided down here. Seems like a lot of fuel though for his carriers to do that. So I don't know. I mean, I like to think Australia and New Zealand are not terribly prudent plays. Fiji and Pago could be possibilities, but seem less exciting. And, maybe the Line Islands, but again, that doesn't really change anything strategically. Like the big, oh my God, I'm going to surprise you. It feels like Pearl or Sri Lanka. Alternatively, I suppose you could go for Alaska. I don't know what the rules are on if you land in like Anchorage or anything like that. How does that impact American units that get unlocked? It is worth a fair bit. The weather up there would be murder on his pilots, though, in terms of ops losses. Still, he could do it. It's worth not an insignificant amount, and it's pretty lightly held. Anchorage has a regiment of good troops, not even great troops. Sri Lanka seems like the most likely play. Either Sri Lanka or some kind of balls to the wall surprise strike on Pearl, but Pearl has more fighter aircraft than I remember. Granted, a lot of their experiences aren't great because they're mostly training squadrons, but unless he could go in there when we're set to train, unless he could get in there without any warning, I just can't see him bombing 359 aircraft, 200 of which are fighters. He would take a real punishing on his Zeros. His attack aircraft would take a huge punishing on the flak. And I don't know how many ships it's realistic for him to sink. I could pull the battleships back if we wanted to the west coast, but then we'd actually lose quite a bit of our flak defenses at Pearl because ships in harbor contribute to the flak value. So I don't know. Sri Lanka seems like the most likely target, I guess. Now that I'm talking through that, it does seem like Sri Lanka could be a striking point. So yeah, there's that. Let's see here. What else are we going to look at? So we already know that the Philippines is very, the alternative, which we didn't talk about, is that some kind of land thrust through China, which we do see one unit moving west here to engage the 60th Corps here sitting in the open. So he could be trying to split our forces in the southern China. That is a very real possibility. We did start pulling back our troops to the east of Guilin because they felt too isolated in that position from a thrust between Guilin and Luchou. So while I am abandoning a good defensive position, I am pulling back 2,700 assault value, several divisions worth of troops back toward Guilin so they don't get isolated. We're working on the fortifications at Guilin. They're at level 3, almost to level 4. And Luchou is at level 3, almost to 4. Luchou's problem is it's not very well defended. Guilin is better defended. But yeah, Luchou is not. So if he's going to drive between these two cities, what do the roads look like here? He could definitely do that. Guilin has a backdoor escape through this bad road north toward Kuaiyang. The real risk, I think, is that he pushes up to Guilin or Luchou, and then he drives up these really good roads up toward Kuaiyang. So if he bypasses Guilin and then just drives up this way, he will make very good time on these very major roads. I do have some reinforcements on the way. I don't know if they'll get there in time. Did we have a strat move? We do have one. The 88th Corps is moving strategically by rail to Luchou. So they should hopefully get there before he attacks the 60th Corps. Well, not before he attacks the 60th Corps, but before he attacks the 60th Corps and then drives it back. Alternatively, we could throw one of these, since we do have the troops to the east of Guilin, we can set this 66th Corps, or at least, let's not do that. Let's keep these guys here. But the 71st Corps, we're going to strat move into Luchou while we've got that railway open. So that'll give us a little bit more strength. Again, Intel only has one unit, so I don't think it's, at least as of now, any massive force is at least a hex or two behind. And again, these are bad roads, so this is a slower movement. But I don't have any indication of any other major Japanese assaults. We do have a few units to the east of Cyan here, but no other intel about other large formations. So the southern thrust is something I'm a little bit worried about. The other thing is it could be Burma, but I don't worry too much about Burma at the moment because, well, we're supposed to lose Burma, I guess, if that's the right way to put it. What else do we have here? So very limited air activity. In fact, no one lost an aircraft. I don't know if that would be true at any point in the historical Second World War. Was there a day where not a single aircraft on either side was destroyed? I don't know. By the way, apparently we've destroyed almost 400 Zeros. That's a lot, especially at this stage in the war. And almost 200 of those in air-to-air combat. Ops losses, fair chance the pilot survives or at least is, wounded and can be healed. But air-to-air loss, good chance, especially because Japan's on the offensive, good chance that the pilot is lost. We haven't been doing a lot of offensive air attacks. It's been mostly Japanese offensive air attacks, which again means most of those pilots lost. 47 also lost a flak, so almost 250 aircraft lost over hostile territory for the Japanese. And then the Sally 2A has been devastated as well. 247 Sally 2As, 215 G4 M1 Bettys. That's a lot of aircraft. 147 Army fighter aircraft, the KI-43-1 Oscar. And then you finally get the first Allied aircraft, 5 down the list, the Buffalo, 138 Buffaloes. 104 of those lost in air-to-air combat. Then you've got the G3M Nell at 122. The Lily at 110. And then you only then do you get the second Allied aircraft, the P-40E, 106 of those. 103 Ki-15-2 Babs. 103 Dutch 139 WH-3. They're a two-engine bomber. I think Hauser, you're actually making a model of this thing. It's a weird-looking aircraft. And then again, another Japanese aircraft in the Ki-21 Sally, and then you get into the H-81, which is a P-40 variant, Ki-30, and then you start getting into more Allied stuff. Hudsons, Catalinas, B-339Ds, which are Buffaloes, and other stuff. But yeah, a lot of aircraft lost. A lot of Japanese aircraft lost. Top pilots, no change. Cole, 8 kills. He's dead. Then Harlem tied for second. He's a Dutchman. And then you've got a bunch of guys in the AVG-1 squadron. And otherwise, maybe he's going to send the carriers up to try and sweep. You know what he could do? And I don't know that I would advise this because it feels, especially with all the attrition he's been taking. But one other thing he could do, move the Kitty Butai up into the Andaman Sea and pound Rangoon's Air Force into smithereens. We have 159 aircraft at Rangoon, 129 fighters, a lot of them my best crews. But if he brought all 6 carriers up there and just pounded it into nothing, and actually I think he's got the Junyo by now, so he might have 7 or 8 carriers. If he brought them all up and just pounded them into nothing, he would win that battle. He would lose a lot more aircraft than I think he wants to lose, especially amongst his best pilots. But he would probably win the campaign if he did that. Like, he would inflict so much pain on the Air Force there. And if it was in conjunction with some bombardments with battleships at Pegu and Mulmine, and in conjunction with an army move, he could certainly use the mailed fist of the Kiributai and Japanese bombardment assets to crush Burma, which I suppose would be the logical thing to do. Sri Lanka, the more we talk about it, feels like the place to go, though, which is my natural inclination of why it won't happen, but it could. I don't think we saw any ships sunk this last turn. Nothing on the intel. What's the most recent stuff sunk? May 21st, there was an Australian cargo ship. We claimed the Hibiki to a mine near Batavia. I don't know if that's true. We also claimed the armored cruiser. I've been playing too much Rule of Waves. We claimed the heavy cruiser Suzia via mine. I don't believe that. That's fog of war. Dutch tanker Maniverta. That definitely sank. Kaiguro unknown. I don't think that happened. Yeah. Any SIGINT? Let's take a look. SIGINT reports. Some radio transmissions at Hiroshima Kuri. I suppose that could be ships putting to sea for whatever big plan he has. Tank regiment planning for an attack on Cyan. The first tank regiment is located at 8741. Where is that? 8741. Oh. Okay. So first tank regiment is here. So this is an armored unit right here in the vicinity of Cyan. We also know a different armored unit is planning for an attack on Cyan. So I suppose it could be a push towards Cyan in northern China. That's possible. I don't, that doesn't worry me too much. Like, it's a threat, but it's been a threat. There's nothing new there. 17th Division's located at 7953. So that's so he's got a division here. That's interesting. A division here to the west of Hanyang would indicate that it's moving toward Guilin. There's no real reason to post a division here in the middle of nowhere. So that could be evidence that he's making a play toward Guilin. That could certainly reinforce our thought that maybe there's a major southern drive in China. Of course, if he is pushing from here, the fact that I'm pulling these troops out of good defensive terrain means that if this is a diversion in the center here, it worked, and we fell for it because we gave up good entrenchments there. So that's something to consider. Nothing I can do about it now. Yeah, I don't know. China Expeditionary Army planning for an attack on Sand. So we have some pretty strong indications between one of the armored units, a headquarters unit, and the vicinity of a second armored unit. Pretty strong indications the Japanese may be making a play for Cyan. Not a lot I can do about that at the moment. Frankly, because of Cyan's bad location, it's kind of something that's going to fall no matter what you can do because it's in a clear hex. So that's something you got to be mindful of, got to be worried about kind of at all times. We do have other troops positioned in various locations to block a breakthrough. He could take northern China, but we do have troops in the mountains here to block the pass toward Chongqing, and they're already dug in somewhat. And then we also have some troops further back in that same mountain pass that are also already dug in or digging in, including an anti-tank regiment, which would go a long way. Those 36 anti-tank guns would go a long way toward stopping a Japanese blitzkrieg. And then we can certainly push more troops north if it looks like an attack on Cyan is materializing. We've got about 1,100 assault at Cyan and another 2,600 to the south, so that's about 3,700. We got some troops blocking a southern pass here at Anqing, which I could sort of be-ish vulnerable, but we've got a very far out sort of picket force down here. I don't think there's any way for him to cut that. Nope. So at the base of this pass, basically, we've got troops just to this west of Nanying. So plenty of time to shift troops around if they make a drive that way, I would think. So yeah, that's the situation. If we take a look at ship availability, I think we got the Wasp coming online soon. 18 days for the Wasp. We have the Prince of Wales, which survived, on its way back to England for repairs. She is 64 days away, so about 2 months. We have American ships in South Africa undergoing refit. So the Lexington and Saratoga are out of commission for another 3 weeks, undergoing their refit. We have a air group under the Enterprise on their way to South Africa. They'll be there in a little over a week, 8 days. So when the other ships have 1 week left, the Enterprise will arrive. And I mean, we could give the Enterprise, well, her system damage is 0, but maybe we'll look at upgrading some aircraft or other things like that when they arrive. Also, I suppose one other thing we might want to consider, are these guys unloading? Where are they going? Eastern U.S. Off-map move pending. Why? I'm very confused. Did they not why are they loading? They should be unloading, right? They should be unloading fuel here. Return cargo none. Unless they just arrived, I guess we'll have to keep an eye on that. They just haven't unloaded yet. I need to go back and look at the previous turn. I think that's probably the case. We were also sending 90,000 fuel almost to Perth. So again, if he was making a raid toward Perth, this is an incredibly valuable tanker convoy. 90,000 fuel, 11 tankers, a lot of victory points tied up in this unescorted convoy on the way to Perth. In addition to that 90,000 fuel convoy, there's a 10-ship tanker convoy also on the way to Perth with another 40,000, although this one has escorts. So that's about 130,000 fuel between those two. And then we've got a single cargo ship on the way to Skoktra, which is that in Australia too? Why is it? I'm not sure. Oh, that's not the one that we selected. Anyway, there's a lot of shipping going into Perth. I don't know where that one's going, though. Not sure. Why would we send fuel here? There's not a refinery here. I guess if we wanted to use it as a base. We also have some 32,000 troops that are on their way to Karachi. We could try and divert them somewhere. We've got an American division there. The 40th American Division is on there. We've got the 27th American Division also going to Karachi. So we've got 2 American infantry divisions and a fair amount of support troops on their way to India. Also some field artillery regiments here. So we're really filling India with a large percentage of our American troops that are deployable. So I suppose that could be something else we want to consider, maybe shifting some stuff around. Maybe we could get one of those divisions into Sri Lanka, perhaps, if the Japanese make no move before they arrive on map. That certainly is an option. The only question is whether they arrive in time. I don't want to send them to their death and they die on boats. But we could do that. We could divert them there. I wouldn't send all of them. I think that would be a waste. Because if he does make a push through Burma, I want to make sure I've got troops along the border between Burma and India to prevent a breakthrough or prevent any kind of landing on the Indian coast. So we'd probably send one of the divisions to India still, but we could divert one of them to Sri Lanka. Alternatively, Australia is pretty empty. That's the other thing that makes me a little nervous. So we might want to send some of them to Australia. There's just a lot of me being like, I'm scared. Maybe I should just title this video the I'm scared. We already have a fair bit of troops in India as well. 22nd East African Brigade recently arrived there. We've got the U.S. Marine Corps Air Wing, which gives us a whole bunch of aviation support. We've put way too many American aircraft probably already into India. About 200 are just at Karachi. I think there's some more at Bombay. Got about 50 more at Bombay. Calcutta has a lot of aircraft, and a big chunk of those are American. So we could send these guys to Sri Lanka. We could send, because we've got more fighters coming in too, don't we? I think one of these groups has, there's a Marine squadron on this ship. Very small one. And then this group has a bomber group and also a Royal Canadian Air Force P-40 group, so about 13 of those there. And then the 13 A-24 Banshees, which are basically Dauntlesses. What's our aviation support look like at Bombay? We have 258 aviation support, which means we could put 190 more aircraft into Sri Lanka. So that is a good idea, I think, is maybe sending some of those aircraft to Bombay. Or not Bombay, to Sri Lanka. I mean, we could even fly them in from India, though. That's the thing, is like sending them to Calcutta doesn't preclude our ability to send them into Sri Lanka either. We've reinforced Diego Garcia with a couple of Marine Defense battalions, so at least he can't just easily walk in and take that base along our supply line. Coast is something I'd like to put a squadron of fighters in there. He's been bombing here a bit, but I don't have the ability to do that quite yet. Do the Allies have any float fighters? Like the Japanese have float planes that were also fighter aircraft. Did the Allies have anything like that that was halfway decent? Like if you were dealing with unescorted bombers, did they have anything that could knock some of those down that were float planes? Because I've got a tender at Coast, but I don't have any fighters there, and I don't have an airstrip built there. That'd be interesting if you had like a... Well, yeah, PBYs, float planes for sure, but they're not going to shoot down enemy bombers. Not in any kind of numbers. Late war, Hauser. Well, that's no good to me. America should build a float plane version of the F-35. How much would that cost? I guess theoretically with the vertical takeoff variant, if you've got somewhere you can land a helicopter, you can take an F-35 off, theoretically. Although I think that engine puts down so much heat that like the... Can the F-35, and you might know this, Hauser, can the F-35B take off from a dirt strip? Like the Harrier could? Because I see all this stuff like out of Japan where it's like they're refitting their helicopter carriers to carry the F-35. And I think there was something about like how some of the LHDs, it would like melt stuff. Stick to streaming. Well, whatever. I just want to know. Dirt strip stuff is interesting. P-40 will only float once. Okay. All right. What else do I have? I don't know that I have anything else this particular episode. We looked at top pilots. We looked at ship sunk and ship availability. Ship withdrawals. What's coming up? Nothing for 21 more days. A couple of destroyers. Where are these guys? Whoops. Task Force 328 and 307. I'm assuming those might actually be at Bombay. .307 is. Not sure where the other one is. I can look it up off stream. But yeah, anything else you guys want to see? We're just doing a short stream tonight. We're not gonna play anything else. But maybe tomorrow. It's been a while since I've streamed. I need to be way better than at streaming than I have been lately. I've been super AWOL and I don't like it, but I've also been struggling because there haven't been a lot of games out lately that I want to play. Like there just hasn't been a lot going on. I want to play a lot of stuff that's coming out soon. I don't want to play a lot of stuff that is out now. We might do another Great War Western Front series from the Allied perspective. We're waiting on Graviteam's DLC to come out. Or not Graviteam. We're waiting on the DLC to come out for Grand Tactician, the Civil War. I suppose we could revisit Gunner Heat PC, but I like the direction that game's development is going, but I'd like to see it get a little bit further along. I'd like to see, frankly, the Soviet stuff come online. But yeah. So anyway, guys, I think that's all we've got for tonight. So I hope you guys did enjoy this brief stream. Until next time, this is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching. And until next time, I'm out.